Everybody, welcome back to Final Resonance TV and episode number 13 of Van Halen Stories. Today, my guest is Ruben. Is it Reza? Is that right?
Yes.
Ruben Reza from Los Angeles, California. And Ruben and I know each other through the Instagram Van Halen fans. We're all up there together, like everybody that probably watches this. Everybody knows each other. It's kind of crazy like that.
Yeah.
But he grew up in the LA scene, played in the LA scene, and it was part of the big '80s scene there in the Hollywood area. And like you off camera, you were telling me your kind of your story, your basic story. So you lived in LA your entire life. And just kind of give
Born
us a
and
little
raised.
background about how you lived, where you lived, and what got you into music, and then we'll get into the Van Halen thing.
Oh, you got it. So yeah, and thanks for having me on
Sure.
your
Thank you for being
program.
here,
I
man.
definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um, Another Van Halen connection, and it's kind of cool how Eddie Van Halen still connects people, and that's pretty awesome.
That's right.
So yeah, I was born and raised in LA, California, and East LA, kind of like an east side suburb of Los Angeles, California, right on the border of downtown LA and the San Gabriel Valley, Pasadena, South Pasadena, Alhambra, all those areas. I started playing guitar at the age of 14, and it was like the summer of 1980, and I absolutely had no interest in playing the guitar. I didn't even really know, what a guitar was all about, but I had this friend who was selling a Les Paul copy, and we were in summer school together. He's like, "Hey, come over to my house after school. I'm selling this guitar, and maybe you'd be interested in buying it." I'm like, "All right, sure, whatever." And I go to his house, and he pulled out it's called a heater Les Paul copy.
Okay.
It looked great. I didn't know that from Adam. I just saw the pickups, the knobs. It's shiny, and this is 1980. And then he's like, "Yeah, this is the price." And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And I go home and talk to my parents, and they're like, "Okay, let's get to the guitar." And I'm like, "Okay." And I get this guitar. I'm like, I don't even know what to do with it. But I was able to just figure it out. I just started playing. I had a great year. I was able to pick up like Back in Black, all this stuff. And I even made my first little amp out of an 8-track recorder. I just got the output jack, plugged it into a speaker, and figured out how to get my guitar through it. So that was my first amp. And I joined my first band actually about 3 weeks after I started playing, and all I need was rhythms. And we did a bunch of hard rock covers, and then about 3 weeks after I joined, they kicked me out because they're like, "Hey, dude, you need to learn how to play guitar solos." I'm like, "Hey, I told you guys, and I was joining. I just started playing. I don't know anything but rhythm." They're like, "Man, well, we need a lead guitar player." So they kicked me out of the band. So fast forward, uh, playing the LAC in different bands throughout the years. And today, yeah, I'm still very active today. I do a lot of, I have my own band called the Ruben Reza Group. It's kind of a Jeff Beck, Eric Johnson, Satriani instrumental type of thing. I play rhythm guitar as a hired gun in a rock band called Carry On Band. I'm also a worship musician. I play a lot of churches around here in Southern California. I also do recording gigs, like sessions. I played on some country track late last year, one of the Willie Nelson type of thing. Then I just, do basically anything and everything. I do a couple of videos. I used to do a lot more videos a couple years ago, product reviews and little things. But if you go to my Instagram account, you'll see that I put like little snippets of things. I think I have this thing called "To Which Song Does This Lick Belong," where I just play a lick and people can comment, what the song is. So yeah, so that's kind of, in a nutshell,
Cool.
my history.
So
And
you're from a
yeah,
musician, from a guitar player standpoint. You started playing, and then what was it the guys you were really loving?
well, the first guy, believe it or not, that I saw a picture of and said, "I want to be this guy," was Malcolm Young. I had the Back in Black, and I just see Malcolm in a T-shirt with that Gretsch, and I'm like, "That's I want to be that guy." And so Malcolm Young was my first, influence or inspiration. And then I heard Randy Rhoads, I heard Crazy Train, and I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And I was already playing guitar, and his sound and everything about his playing just kind of made me get serious about the guitar. So I got the records, and back then you could slow records down. So I slowed everything down, and and learned everything about Randy Rhoads. And actually, I started the first Randy Rhoads tribute band back in 1991
Hmm.
in LA.
Wow.
And actually, we had Dolores Rhoads gave us her blessing. We gave her a tape. She said, "Go for it." She's like, "No, this, honor Randy," and she gave us the approval to do it, which was great. So we didn't do it to kind of a not like an Eagle thing. We only just did it every March, on the anniversary of Randy's death. We didn't do it throughout the year because we just were hardcore Randy fans and we just wanted to honor Randy around that time.
Sure.
So Randy Rhoads was, the guy where I got serious about it, but is Eddie Van Halen. It's just kind of weird how I learned Eddie Van Halen stuff. It was with Randy. He had a style which is so precise because he was a really skilled musician. So you had to kind of like really sit down and figure out the theory and everything he's doing. But with Eddie Van Halen, I just remember one day all of a sudden playing with my friend Joaquin on drums. And then we looked at each other, we're like, dude, we pretty much went through the whole Van Halen catalog. And I'm like, yeah, how did that happen? I'm like, how did it just kind of like just I don't know how to explain it, but like Eddie Van Halen's style. I guess I listened to it so much, but I never really sat down because he was just so wild, and his form was more free form, kind of crazy and bluesy and flashy. But it just all like came together that way. And I think another reason why it's like I hated tuning down a half step. Okay, I got to learn Van Halen, then okay, got to come
Yeah.
back up to learn
Well, not
everybody
only
else, and
that,
then
it's not
choosing Randy.
exactly a half step. It's always off. They've got this new thing.
Yeah, like the first record's a quarter step,
Everything was off.
and then he went back to normal. Then he went back to normal tuning in 1984.
Hmm.
For the most part, and then a couple of records before that. There's a few songs where he had that. But then, yeah, Randy Rhoads was my guy. But I'll tell you, I remember the very first time, like it was yesterday. The first time I heard Van Halen, I was in elementary school because it came out in what 78, right?
Hmm. Yep.
I was in elementary school, and I was in a flag football team, and I remember all of us sitting in the back of the coach's truck. We're going to drive off to play this other school, and one guy, Michael Villalobos, he had a boom box, and he puts in the cassette and he presses it. Then all of a sudden you hear ding, the horns from Money with the Devil, and then this boom, boom, boom. Then the pick going across the strings between the bridge and the tailpiece, and then Edward's tone, and just being so gigantic, and everybody's like looked at the boombox and Michael like what is that? Because at that time people were listening to like ELO, the Cars, bands like that. And then
Sure.
you hear Van Halen, and all of us are like, and he's like, "What's this band called Van Halen?" And we're like, "Van Halen," and he just listened to the whole
Right.
thing on the way to the school, and I was just, and this is before I even had any interest in playing the guitar, but it left such an impression on me, when I started playing the guitar, and the whole Randy Rhoads thing. But the difference between Randy to me and Edward Van Halen was, you know, Randy was great solo and great, composer and all that. Um, and I'm not knocking Randy, they're just two different people, but Edward's riffs, man. Edward had these amazing riffs. It's like he didn't even know the rules. Like Randy knew all the rules, and he broke them, wherever, he wanted to. But Eddie Van Halen, like he always said, if it sounds good, then it is good. And that's Eddie Van Halen. He's just so out there with his writing style and his riffs, and the theory's like out the door.
Yeah, as a
And
player,
and yeah,
as a player yourself, the whole thing where he does linear patterns and stuff that you wouldn't even have thought of yourself. You wouldn't even like when you're first learning to play a guitar, maybe you're just playing 1 2 3 4 just to get your fingers kind of. But if you were a kid and you learned how Eddie did it, you'd be like, wow, this is so much easier than I thought. Because the way
yeah,
he did things was so out of the theory box, that you wouldn't even they actually fit your hand and you feel fairly comfortable with the idea of the shapes. It's not always easy at all because his thing was
Yeah.
that with Eddie, it wasn't just what he played; it's how he played it, right? So much of it was his touch and his feel, as much as anything he did or how he did it. But yeah, man, when I learned his catalog, though, you think, oh, these things are easy, but they're so out of the box. They're extreme to me, harder than to learn Randy because I grew up with the pentatonic scale and major and minor scales, and
Yeah.
I learned diminished scales and a lot of things that Randy was in, but Eddie, just like you said, none of it made any sense when you sit down with his stuff. It just throws it out the window.
Yeah, like, and especially the you have the fair warning T-shirt on, right?
Yeah,
Is
right.
that what you're wearing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that record, um, to me, like you're talking about Eddie Van Halen and how he was out of the box, but when I listen to like really closely to that record, and you hear what Eddie's doing, um, he that record to me, out of all the records, like you listen to the solos, it's like this guy, it's like all of a sudden on that record, like this theory came in because you listen to the solo for So This Is Love,
Mhm.
it's in D major,
Right.
and he's playing the B minor pentatonic, which is relative to D major, but
Yep.
then he's also going up to D minor pentatonic, which is, you're like straight up blues stuff. He's mixing it all up. He does the same thing on the solo for Mean Street. It's when he ends with that A major scale going to the C, which is the minor to the A. But you listen closely to everything that he's doing, and he's hitting the notes that he wants to hit. This is what I'm hearing anyway. He's hitting the notes that he's not being reckless. I mean, he has that fire and that he always had and that hunger, but it's like I think during that time he probably had the Holdsworth thing probably going like 100 miles an hour in his head because he was playing amazing on that record. But just the note selection, and you hear theory, I'm like, okay, he knows what he's doing. He's sitting down and he's like, okay, I can
Yeah.
do
Well,
this here, I can
yeah.
do this there, and
I
just
wouldn't
whips it
say.
out.
I wouldn't say. Like he, this is kind of one of those things, but he was taught classical piano, and yeah, he didn't read it. He didn't read it right, but he played it. So in
Yeah,
his ear, he got used to certain things and those classical
yeah,
compositions, and that ear, once you get a vision or for the sound in your head, I guess it's going to lead you, to wherever you want to go. And you're right. By that point, he had so much in his head. He had so much music in his head. He could get whatever he wanted, and he was just going for it. But yeah, a lot of those patterns, a lot of
yeah.
those sounds, man, they're musically intelligent. And even though he may not know exactly what's related to what, his ear knows what it is.
Yeah, and it could also be because we all know that Fair Warning was supposed to be a solo album, right?
Right.
So for all we know, a lot of that stuff, was created that way because it was going to be geared for a solo album, and maybe a lot of it was already put down, and then they decided to make it, a regular Van Halen album, and Roth being amazing as he is and was, for a guy like David Lee Roth to come in and sing over the craziness that Eddie Van Halen wrote, but still be good. Like Roth's phrasing and his lyrics, like over all that stuff that's going under, you put in a lot of other singers in there and they're scared. They're like, I don't know what to do. I mean, Sammy Hagar even said on that one instrumental on Balance, he's like, I couldn't come up with anything for that song. So they made it an instrumental. I forgot the
But
name of the song.
Roth would have been able to do it. You're right, because Roth had it. He had
Oh
some
yeah.
kind of weird. They were so unique together because Roth had that ability, like you said, to thread his stuff
Hmm.
between what Ed was doing. It was just nobody. I mean, when Sharon came in, I thought that was a big problem with Sharon was that you know they didn't have Roth. They didn't have the guy who could thread through that material of Eddie's, and that was the magic of that part of that. And there's also his brother, which you know, after listening to the isolated tracks, years ago when they first came out, and just listen to the drums, just listen to him, hearing what he was doing there, man. Like on "I'm the One," what he's doing in
Yeah.
that. It's
Oh
unbelievable.
yeah,
It's unbelievable. He just never really,
it
his
is.
brother was so powerful that it was hard for him to be seen. But any other time, he would have been like a god. You know what I mean? Right? Everybody would been talking
Yeah, I
about
mean,
him.
even yeah,
Amazing.
even on up to different kind of truth, different kind of truth. Roth is just you take that song "Blood and Fire," which was that instrumental from the that movie in the '80s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then Roth, puts lyrics and vocal phrasing melodies over it. Dude, that they were a great team. I mean, they were like, perfect together, and
Even
that
though,
was a great era.
even though
And
they
this,
couldn't stand each other.
the,
Even though
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they always had that problem. That wasn't anything new to Van Halen's, or to Roth. But you know what? One
I
thing
mean,
about I was talking about last week with a guest that I hadn't put out yet is the whole thing when Tattoo came out. And when we were younger, we were there when Jump came out, and when Jump came out, it was a little bit of a shock to our systems. You know what I mean? Like, what is
oh
this?
yeah.
And then when Tattoo came out, it was sort of the same thing. People were kind of going, I don't know, man. But to me, man, I totally got Tattoo right out of the gate. I mean, Roth is Roth, and he has that thing.
Well, Tattoo, that was a riff, an old Van Halen riff, but it was just updated or modernized,
True.
and you can hear some of the keys, in the background that they added, and the vocal line was changed a little bit. But I remember like when I heard it, I was kind of like, oh. But my wife, she loved it right out the gate. My wife's a huge Van Halen fan,
Mm-hmm.
and she liked it. And it took me, a little bit for it to warm up on me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and
Well,
I
yeah,
know we're digressing. We could probably talk all week long about Van Halen.
yeah. You know
And
that.
I should probably get back to this.
Yeah, go ahead. So,
All
so,
right, so
yeah, go ahead.
I'll go for it. Did you want to say something?
No, go ahead. Good.
Okay, so it all kind of starts like with what I was talking about, the Randy Rhoads thing. I was in this Randy Rhoads tribute band in 1991. I think we started. Um, so in this Randy Rhoads tribute band, I had a bass player. And the bass player actually was a friend of Randy Rhoads and took lessons from Randy. He knew the whole family because he grew up in Burbank with Randy. Used to go to all the Quiet Riot shows. Always took pictures of Randy, etc. Got to play Randy's Concord. Lucky guy. I
Mm-hmm.
never got to do that. But Michael, who was the bass player, his first instrument was a guitar, and he took lessons from Randy. So when I got to know Michael, we talked about Randy Rhoads because we were both freaks. So we started this Randy Rhoads tribute band. Um, and then Michael was in this big LA, a couple of pretty well-known LA bands in the strip in the '80s, late '80s at the time. One band was called Fatal Attraction, and they were kind of like Hollywood vampires and kind of Motley Crue thing. They looked scary and had fangs and all that. Then he was another band called Trick or Treat. Um, so Michael is still a Mormon, and he was tight, close friends with Chris Holmes, who is also a Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know Chris Holmes's friendship with Eddie Van Halen. Right, Jeff? Yeah,
Of
Chris
course.
Holmes, Eddie Van Halen borrowed Chris Holmes' Destroyer to record Women and Children First.
And
So
his
they were always like
Marshall
lending.
cabinets,
I'm
which is
sorry.
something I did. This Marshall, the strip Marshall cabinets were Chris Holmes's, I hear, and Greg Leon, who's a big guy, was a big guy in the '80s out there. Greg Leon, you know him? Who that is?
Oh
Greg Leon.
yeah, yeah.
All right, Greg
Hmm.
Leon was in
Oh
Quiet
yeah.
Riot or DeBro after Randy left, and Greg Leon said that when he asked Chris Holmes about those cabinets, the reason they were stripped is because they were stolen. That's what Greg Leon said. Now I don't know if that's true, but nobody wants to ask Chris Holmes because Chris Holmes will beat you to death. You
Well,
know
it's
how
funny
big?
because that
Yeah,
band I mentioned,
yeah. Go ahead.
that that band I mentioned earlier that I was in, Heroes in Love, actually the drummer and the bass player Carl and Bob, they were in the Greg Leon Invasion.
Okay,
So God, it's such a small world, man.
right
It
on,
just
man.
the older you get, the world gets smaller.
That's true.
um, so going back to my friend Michael and Chris Holmes. So this was 1992, and uh, do you know that Chris Holmes and Lita Ford were married at one time, right? They,
Yep.
okay, so they were together, they were married, and in 1992 is when their marriage kind of started falling apart. And I don't know the details of why their marriage fell apart, but it wasn't because they had a house together over off of in Tahunga. Um, and they were married, living together, of course. And then I don't know what happened with their marriage, but basically she kicked him out.
Hmm.
Everything. And Chris Holmes had no place to stay. And I don't know. You can edit whatever you need to edit out
Okay.
of this. You know, I'm probably saying stuff that people really don't know about. But Chris Holmes had nowhere to go. So Michael, my bass player in my Randy Rhoads band, you know, he lived in Burbank, and out back, he had in the backyard of the house, he had a trailer that basically it was just there, but it was a livable place. So Chris reaches out to Michael. It's like, dude, she kicked me out. I got nowhere. I need a place to stay. I need a place for my gear, and you know, help me out. And Michael's, yeah, dude, you can stay in the back, stay in the trailer, and of course you can leave your gear here. And so that's what happened. And then one day, Michael calls me up after Chris, you know, settles in and brings all his marshals over. And Michael calls me on the phone and is like, "Hey, Ruben, what's up? What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just here hanging out." Why? He's like, "Dude, I got Chris's stuff here, and this is stuff that you know because I guess because whenever Eddie Van Halen would do a tour or finish touring, some of the gear he would just pass on to Chris. He's like, you know, I don't need it. You know, here, man. He just gave him gear, and he's like, I have I have Chris's Marshalls here, and you know these are Eddie Van Halen's old Marshalls. I go, yeah, I know. He's like, dude, Chris isn't here right now. Why don't you get a guitar and come over? I'm like, what? He's like, come over right now. And I'm like, okay. So I have this Warmoth homemade wannabe Frankie type of Strat thing with the 59 and the bridge and a little 59 in the neck and an old school Floyd without the fine tuners. And then I just grab it and I race from East LA down to Burbank. And then we go into the garage where the amps are, and he has two Marshall stacks, and and he has like a rack, and inside the rack, and I don't know if Eddie Van Halen did this or Chris did this, but inside the rack, there's like a panel. It's probably like maybe a 4-space rack panel. And he mounted the Variac into this panel of the rack. So all you see is a flat panel, but you see the knob, you know, to turn the voltage down on the Variac in the front of the panel. Then the body of the Variac is behind it inside the rack. And I'm just looking at this stuff and he's like, all right, dude, let's plug in. He's like, but we're not going to change anything, you know, or else, you know, because he'll know if you changed anything. I said, okay, well, let's fire it up. I won't touch a thing. We didn't change the volume. We didn't do anything. We
Right.
turned it on. I plug in. It was, I, I, I can't even describe the sound that I heard it was just straight into this Marshall. I don't know. I don't remember where he had the Variac set, but this sound, Jeff, you know, my maple neck Warmoth Strat Floyd into that thing. It was like the most glorious tone I ever heard. I couldn't believe what was coming out of my guitar. Like I would drop the volume down and I would tap out like Women in Love and the compression and the sustain, like notes would just fly off the fingerboard. Like I would just barely like tap these harmonics and they're coming out. And the sustain and this big warmth, but it wasn't really like a gain type of sound. It was just like this big power sustain tone. And I think I played for about half an hour. Then he was getting nervous. He's like, "Well, you know, he might be home any minute. We got to stop." But dude, this sound was the best guitar sound that I ever played in my life. It's hard to describe, but when I hear like what Eddie Van Halen used to say, as a big warm brown sound, and Eddie Van Halen used the word sustain a lot. It was all that, but it really wasn't like, preamp gain. It's just all power and filling up the garage and sustain and dynamics and compression.
How much
Everything was there. You hit it hard. Say again?
how much volume were you at though? I mean, because that's the thing. Eddie, you said the Variac was to keep the volume down, right? And to keep
Yeah.
the tubes working hard. There is a Sunset Sound video out there where one of the guys who was a guitar player, for Doug's his name, Messenger. He was there in the studio at Sunset Sound when they did Fair Warning, and he played the rig. And Eddie goes, "Hey, check this out! Look how much sustain and I can get out of this." And he said when he played it, it was like you said, exactly what you said, the same kind of thing.
It was like that, and we talk about volume. Um, it was loud, but it wasn't like, you know, neighbors are going to call the cops. But it was just that sound. And I honestly, because at that time, and I still to this day, I'm an avid Mesa Boogie guy, and that's all I played at that time. I had my Mesa Boogie rack, and Mesa Boogies are known for a really preamp type of sound. And this is like nothing I've ever experienced before, and it was all that, just like that. I think I remember seeing that Sunset Sound video where the guy said he played through a half stack. It wasn't very loud through Eddie Van Halen's half stack. I think it was during the Fair Warning sessions, I think he said.
Yep.
And but it was all that sound, that sustain, that warmth, that tone, and it wasn't even killing my ears. It was like pleasant. It was loud, but it wasn't, piercing, nothing. It was just like it just filled up this garage, um and it was just amazing. It was amazing, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that experience. And I don't know what happened after, with the gear and Chris. Well, I know now he lives in another country. I don't know where he lives now, but
It's in
I'll
France.
tell you, man, I'm I'm so thankful that we did it, and Michael called me and I said, yeah, I'll go down there, because I didn't know what to expect, and I know he's like, yeah, this is Eddie Van Halen just gave him, this is his stuff. And and this is what Chris uses. The only thing different I think that Chris did with Wasp, that band, is they put a chorus, like you can hear like a chorus on the guitar, but that wasn't on that day. It was just a straight amp, and dude, it was just amazing, that tone. Um,
So I wonder
so
why.
yeah, I was just,
Yeah, I wonder why he kind of went more preamp as he went further into his career. Instead of whatever he was doing.
yeah, yeah. I think that Soldano is where it started. Since he got that Soldano amp, is where he started going that direction. I guess, he used to say that the Marshall was fading out and it wasn't getting the tone that it used to get. Then, he met Michael Soldano, and then the 5150 was kind of modeled after that amp, even, down to the looks, the panel and the grill and everything. But yeah, I mean, I like Edward's tone. Um, the live tone for the Carnal Knowledge record. I even like the record tone for Balance, but honestly, I don't even know what he really used on Balance. Some people say he used 5150 combos, or some people say it was the Marshall. But his tone is really good. It's really clean and
It's a
clear. All the
mix. Yeah, I
notes are
think that
there.
was a
Yeah.
mix on Balance. And one of my buddies that's on was the second episode. He was with him in '95 on tour, and when he took him to
Uh-huh.
show him his rig, right? He's showing him his rig. The PV guys are there that day, and my buddy's looking at the
Mm.
rack, and he looks down at the bottom and he sees the old Marshall in there, and he goes, he starts to point to it, and Eddie goes, Marshall was on the road with him until '95, or some Marshall. He said it was the old one, the original one. So yeah, I don't know what
Well,
he
you
was
can
doing.
hear it on you can hear it on OE812 as well. Because I mean, 5150, you can hear that tone, and it's just a little process with the Eventide or whatever he has going on. But on OE812, for me, I hear like something added to that. There's more distortion or gain or preamp. Something's going on in there because it's different than the 5150. And I actually thought on OE812 is when he started using the Soldanos, but I did the research like no, he didn't use the Soldanos on OE812 till after. But the sound to me, especially when you hear Sucker in a three-piece suit when he's just ringing out those G and D chords, just the that grind that's coming out of it. I'm like, man, that sounds like there's something else going on there too. Who knows? I mean, would he really use on anything?
Right, but that yeah, the fair warning tone, that tone in particular. I mean, that's what got me into guitar, man. Seeing him play that Unchained on that TV on the video. That's what it was for me,
Oh
man. When
yeah.
he started that riff, and I was like, well, I guess it was the drop D maybe, because I up to that point probably I knew music some from my uncles and stuff, but I had never heard the drop tuning before, I guess. And that sound with that drop tuning was the thing, man. I was like, what is that?
Yeah. Yeah, and in rock, you never really heard that. I know in country and stuff, guys have been doing that for a while, but in rock, yeah. And especially, for Eddie to do that, but on that record, it's kind of all over the place. There's a lot of songs on Fair Warning that are drop D. It just like
True.
went for it, Sinner's Swing, Hear About It Later, Unchained,
That's
gosh,
true. That's true. Yeah, hear about it later is
Dirty
true.
Movies.
Yeah.
Dirty Movies also has the drop D.
Didn't Drop
And
Dead
I
Legs
think even,
on 84's Drop Dead Legs is a drop D, isn't it? Right? Drop Dead Legs is a
yeah.
drop D. Yeah, he can.
Hmm.
That thing that and I want to say I don't know if this is it just seemed like when I was there and you were there, you probably know this too. It just there was this progression that happened when Eddie came out with the drop D and all that. That then Vi came out with the 7 string, and this started this whole chain reaction of drop tunings that has now turned into 9 string guitars, and you know what I mean. It was
Yeah.
influenced by
Yeah.
that. I mean, we know that that direct lineage started here and then it went here and then it went there. So yeah, Eddie was probably the first person that popularized the drop D in rock.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, if you want to get technical, yeah, you can call it drop D, but being that they're tuned down a
C
half step,
sharp.
it's actually really C sharp, which
True.
is, Black Sabbath,
That's true.
when Black Sabbath,
Yeah,
like,
I guess you can think about Brian May, and Fat Bottom Girls or whatever. That was drop D, and that might have been what year was that? Does that say that was right in there in the early late 70s, early 80s? So I don't know if they were
mhm.
that much whether they were out of time with each other, but around the same time, really. But yeah, Eddie dropped. Now that would have been they would have been in standard drop D, and he would have been in C sharp
Yeah.
at that point. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, that's crazy the stuff that he did that permeated after and still permeates today. People just the kids don't all realize this. I mean, a lot of them are smart enough to go back and look, and they find out. But yeah, it's cool.
One other direction that he went that, I for some reason, I like it. And I kind of, hope he would have had done more with that is when he was doing this, the sustainer and the trans trim stuff, like Me Wise Magic, those two songs, when that record, The Greatest Hits, came out in '86,
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, man, and this is a '96, not '86, and
Mm-hmm.
this is just before I married my wife. She had gotten like these copies of the song before they were released, and I remember hearing Me Wise Magic and that riff, like tan tan tick it tan tick it tan tick it tan tan I was like, man, this has like a fair warning Main Street wickedness, and but hearing everything that intro, and you can hear doing the trans tramp thing and just the tone of the guitar. I love that little, you know, snippet of time of Van Halen. And I had wished they would have kept it together because I think if that version of Van Halen in '96 with Roth, if they would have cut a whole album with what they did with those two songs, they would have been back on top of the heap, man, because those two songs, Can't Get the Stuff Anymore. It has a total kind of like a secret something off of Diver Down, and Me Ways Magic has that cool, mean groove like Main Street. But everything he was doing back then with the sustainer, it was like new territory. But I loved it. I dug it. It was a whole new sound, and the guy is always like trying out different things and reaching. And I love what he was doing. That I wish he would have expanded on that and done a little bit more. I mean, he probably did more on the 3 record, and I don't have much experience listening to it. I think I've heard it a few times, but
Mhm.
the playing on there is amazing. The writing's amazing. The riffs are amazing. But just everything that's overshadowing that record is,
Yeah,
it
yeah. I
is
spent
it
some
is
time
what
with
it
that
is.
record. Chris Gill, Guitar World's one of the writers for Guitar World, was on here, and when they put out the Eruption book, him and Brad Tolinsky, and he said to me, just listen to the music, just try to get past
Yeah.
it for a minute. And so I did that, and it came, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking this is like a soundtrack or instrumental album more than it is
Hmm.
a vocal album. And what we were talking
Yeah.
about a while ago with Roth, how he could weave that, he could weave those melodies there. For some reason, Sharon just didn't get there with that. I don't know why. I just, that was just how
Yeah.
Roth was. He's unique that way. But yeah, that album's actually pretty good when you sit down and you really listen to the detail. Um,
Hmm.
I kind of like have this image in my mind of a posthumous biopic, and that being the music
You
because
have an image in your mind of what?
of that music being in a posthumous, a post, a biopic, at this point, and is, live,
Oh,
and
okay.
gone now. That music was really kind of his final statement, besides the different kind of truth. That was the statement where he was really reaching, trying to really
Yeah.
reach and really go outside the box, and that unfortunately didn't work out. But I think it would have with Roth.
Yeah, I agree. I think unfortunately, the vocal situation in it, you have Eddie Van Halen up here and Alex Van Halen right there with him, and you know, Michael Anthony, an amazing bass player. You have that band, and I don't know how much Michael Anthony actually played on that record or not, but if
Right.
you have somebody in, yeah, I mean, no doubt, Gary Sharon's an amazing talent. The guy has chops for days, but when you get somebody in that, you know, um, just can't relate to it at that level. And again, it could be like a generation difference. You got, Roth and Eddie Van Halen and Alex and Michael, although, they had influences from all over the world, like Roth's into David Bowie and disco and, 40s, Louis Armstrong's type of stuff. And then you get Van Halen into Cream and Black Sabbath and stuff like that. But they're still generationally, they're still from the same cloth, and they can relate that way. And I think, Gary Sharon probably just could never make that connection,
Yeah,
or
you're right
maybe
though.
if what he want if he wanted, maybe if what Gary Sharon wanted to do originally, maybe that would have helped. Because I think he said he wanted to tour first, then go back and do the record. But Eddie Van Halen's like, well, no, we were going to do the record first,
Well,
then
you know
tour.
how it is.
But
Ruben, you've been in bands for forever. You know, chemistry is a wicked little thing, and if you get it right, man, it's
yeah,
it's magic. And if you move one piece, it changes everything. And it could be anybody in your band. It doesn't matter which one. If you have a special chemistry like they had, and you change that one thing, it can. Even with Wolfgang, who did a great job and was awesome. There was just
yeah,
different. It was just a little different. I mean, it wasn't hugely different, but it was a little different. Had a different vibe, and
yeah,
that's what happens with different chemistry, for sure. But I'm glad Wolfgang got to do that with his dad, and I'm glad his dad got to do that with him because that's what they really wanted to do, and it was a great way for them to be together for a while and do that. But yeah, man,
yeah. I mean, who would want to have their son up there? I mean, Wolf is totally capable. Obviously, we witnessed that with our own eyes.
Mhm.
But who wouldn't want they're kids to be up there with them. My son plays drums and he's an amazing drummer, and every chance I get, we're in the garage. He's calling to Neil Peart, and we play Rush for days and stuff. But yeah, I get that. Who wouldn't want to be take your son out on the road? If you're at that level like Eddie Van Halen, yeah, I want to play with my kid. And even Michael Anthony, he even said he gets it. He understood it. There's
Sure.
nothing he could do, but yeah, he got
Yeah.
where Eddie Van Halen is coming from.
Yeah, sure. And
One thing I want to ask you
go
though.
ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Live guitar solos from all the Van Halen tours. What's your favorite live guitar solo? Eddie's Van Halen solo spot.
Oh, probably. I just saw an '84 yesterday. It was really cool. But that tone you're talking about, man. You're talking about the tone, right?
Uh-huh.
In this video, I don't
Yeah.
know where it came from, but I put it on my Instagram. It's just a little piece of the '84 solo, and that tone is there. It's like clean, but he's got sustain. And the amps aren't screeching and
Yeah.
screaming, man. They're not going bonkers.
Mhm.
Like in the early
Yeah.
days in '78, you'd hear that screeching and screaming, and but in '84, he had the tone you're talking about.
Yeah.
Warm. Almost when he would play like some licks, he would be clean almost, just on the edge.
Exactly. And
Go ahead.
and that's hard. I mean, to play through a loud Marshall, like again, it's just being a power sound, but the guys had so much strength in those fingers, and sometimes I've seen some pictures, like, magazines are now online, and there's some shots of like his fingerboard, and sometimes like some of the action shots of his strings on, I don't know what guitars, but I'm like, dude, his action looks like pretty high, and how can he pull all that off, with that action and that speed and that accuracy and just that sound? But it's a combination of everything. Like people say, it's the amp, maybe the pickup in his guitar, but this is it. I mean, for a guy to play that type of sound and to make it seem so effortless, and like that story with Ted Nugent. I think they did a gig or something, or a tour with Van Halen, and at sound check, he plugged in Eddie Van Halen's rig, and he's like, man, I still sound up like Ted Nugent. I was like, yeah,
Right. It
this
is
is where it's
so
at.
much of his hands, yeah,
But
man.
that '84,
Yeah, that one of the things the guys from Guitar World said was, well, especially Chris. Chris was there, and he got to see him play, acoustically on electric, right? Just like you heard on that old interview from way back and when. But he got to see him the way he attacked a string, And there is one video out there where he's doing that when he was giving a guitar away or somebody or something. But you hear him just hitting it, the string with the pick, right? And there's so much attack
yeah,
with a thin pick, right? With a thinner, smaller pick that he used to wear,
yeah,
which was weird, because most of us, I don't know if you did it, but it seemed like most guys or GIT guys were doing the 2.0, and they were playing a hard pick, trying to play really light,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. I use I don't know where it's at. I use the Dunlop Jazz XL, the large ones, because they're not super heavy, but they're not super thin, but they have a nice point, so you can do the fanning. You can totally get away with the Eddie Van Halen fanning thing on there. But going back to 1984, yeah, that to me, that's my favorite solo spot too, because um, he does his stuff, but it's a really creative solo spot where Alex comes out and Michael, and they do that blues rhythm, and Eddie Van Halen's playing that wicked slow blues over that, and then he comes out with the table thing, flips up the guitar, and he does the piano piece, and all the lights come down, and I think for me that just is like a culmination of like all his greatest hits, all the pieces that he would do in his normal spotlight, but those new pieces, that blues jam, and then the piano thing. To me, that's just like the best, guitar solo spot that of all
What
the
uh,
tours,
what was the first tour you saw?
First time I ever saw Van Halen was there's a concert out here called the US Festival in
Oh, you saw that?
1983,
Really?
and that was my first concert. Not only first time seeing Van Halen, but my first concert ever. It
Wow.
was the best day, and the worst day of my life all in one.
So
But for twenty
tell
one
us that
dollars and 50 cents,
$21.50.
Yeah,
Wow.
you got to see Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, Triumph, Scorpions, and Van Halen for $21.50, and
So tell me about that day,
it
because
was great.
I had a friend of mine who drove all the way to California to go to that. He was my first guest on the first interview I ever did on this channel, but he told that story about that day. So you tell me your story.
Yeah, well, I was 16 at the time, and my little brother Jimmy was 14, and we just wanted to go to this concert. So it was out there in San Bernardino, like far away. And this is 1983. So San Bernardino in 1983 is not San Bernardino today. It basically was the desert. That's all it was. So we wanted to go to the show, and my pa- my dad, okay, sure, we'll go. And where is it? We go, San Bernardino. He's like, what? Or like, anyway, he drives us down there the night before the concert, and we go down San Bernardino on the freeway, and we see like these campgrounds, and back then there's no information on the internet. You couldn't look anything up. We just kind of go by ear or word of mouth. And we were in the Glen Helen area, and we saw these campgrounds. So I just told my dad, yeah, this is it. Just drop us off here. He's like, okay. So he drops us off the night before, and there's just tons of people, all these rockers and stuff, people partying and campfires and all that. And then we just start walking around, and we come to find out that the actual concert site is about 6 miles still to go
Oh
from where we
God.
got dropped off at this campsite. So, we're up all night, because we have really nobody to hang with. We're just up until the sun comes out. And then you just see this exodus. A lot of people, getting that were there didn't know that, or maybe they did know that the concert was 6 miles away, but we're all walking along the freeway, on the side of the freeway, just this exodus walking down, trying to get to the concert. And a couple of times we got lucky, and some people in trucks would pick some people up and would take us there. So we finally got through the show, and there was like this big hill. They opened it up, and everybody's just rushing. And it was San Bernardino, summer sun, like over 100 degrees easily, maybe like 108, 110. There all day. I didn't want to get smashed, so we kind of just went about midway back, and we're just sitting there. uh, the sun started coming down around Triumph. Well, the band's Quiet Riot was great. I was into them because of the whole Randy Rhoads thing. Motley Crue, at that time, I wasn't a super huge fan of Motley Crue.
Mhm.
But I remember being really scared by Mick Mars's tone. He had just like this big, scary, monstrous tone. And then Ozzy came out, and me being a Randy Rhoads fan, this is the first time. I don't know if that was Jake Lee's first show with Ozzy or not, but that was the first time I saw Jake. So, that was really important for me, because I just wanted to see the guy who replaced Randy Rhoads, and wow, he doesn't have a tremolo, and he's doing all those crazy sounds, like he has a whammy bar, and he was great. And then Judas Priest came out. I've always been a fan of Judas Priest. Triumph came out next, and that's when the sun started to set, and it was a long day. So I think for Triumph, I slept through most of the set. It was just like, okay, I'm just gonna crash. And then Scorpions came out, and I love Eddie Van Halen. I love Van Halen, but I'll tell you, Scorpions were the band that day, man. When they came out, they were on all cylinders, just firing. The energy, the sound, they were on point,
Yeah, you know
and they
what?
were done.
You know what? I'll say that about the Scorpions. Well, I got you on Scorpions. When they came, Monsters of Rock in '88, they came to Memphis, Tennessee, and I was at that show in '88. And of course, the Scorpions were second on the bill there too. And I felt the same way that day. I was so wore out by the time we got to Van Halen anyway, but the Scorpions were right in the sweet spot, and it was hot as hell like that too. And I couldn't make it, man. I didn't even make it all the way through Van Halen, but I did make it through the Scorpions, and the Scorpions kicked ass.
Yeah, man. I believe it. They were, this is Scorpions '83, so I think it must have been the Blackout record is probably
Right,
what they were,
right.
promoting or supporting. And then Van Halen, well, I don't want to say, and then Van Halen came out, because I'm sure you heard this. It took
Yeah,
like
of course.
2 hours. They showed some movie of some like alien Martian thing, and and people are just like, come on, what's going on? And then they had that little filmed that day. I think they actually shot probably the day before, a couple of days before, where they're backstage, and everybody thinks that's them backstage at that moment, but it was previously shot, and you can tell because Eddie Van Halen has a Frankie, and he's playing that. The neck on it is that rosewood neck from the Rude guitar, with almost looks like the Music Man reverse headstock.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, he's playing that on the video. They're backstage, but as soon as they come out on stage, he has a maple Kramer neck. Uh, so yeah, and they came out, and honestly, dude, I was really excited and looking forward to it, but they were all gone. It's, of course, especially David Lee Roth, and you know, to wait there all day for the band that you want to see, and they come out and they're just plastered. And I was a little bit bummed. I think
Right.
honestly, we probably stood for about 5 songs, and me and my brother Jimmy were like, you know what, dude, let's just start heading back so we can, call our parents, and have them pick us up. So we just left, and a lot of people were leaving, because I remember walking out and it being crowded, walking out and hearing, Eruption, echoing back there. It's like, man, still hearing the whole set. They were so loud, but we
Yeah.
were gone, and
Well,
and
that's a famous story in the manager's book, Noel Monk's book,
oh, really?
that he talks about. He talks about that night, and he says he said, I think he said that was one of either the only time or one of two times that they ever were, that he said that was their worst performance ever that he saw, and he'd been with them since '78.
Man, it was it was kind of a letdown. I remember, like, when we decided to leave, we walked back to the top of the hill where they had, like, vendors and stuff like that, and just I remember looking back down and still wanting to stay. I remember just looking at the show gun. I'm like, I want to stay, but I just can't. I was so bummed out, and almost like hurt. I'm like, my heroes, like Eddie Van Halen, I'm like, they're just like, it's like nothing, and they're just goofing out. They got 1.5 million, and they're drunk, and they're just having a party for themselves.
Yeah, you know what?
But again,
Tell me what you thought about because this thing was like the Woodstock of our generation. What was that like
yeah,
to be in that crowd, man? That was like they say it was 400,000
it was crazy, dude.
people.
It was The people were cool. The crowd was great. The thing that was not cool was the sheriff, and they had mounted sheriff, on horses and stuff,
Mhm.
and these guys, were they'd, like, get their horses and just push into people, kind of like uh like cattle. They're just trying to get people in line and just basically abusing, whatever power or authority they had. The day itself, extremely hot. You see the videos. They had the cannons on the people, and me and my brother, we didn't take any, like, sunscreen or anything, and we got so sunburned. I kid you not. The next day, I could literally just do this to my face, and my skin was like coming off, and all this liquid,
Wow.
because he got badly sunburned. But the day itself was great. It could have been handled a lot better for, from a crowd perspective. But I think that's what a lot of people equate to just being a bad day, because it was extremely hot. Um, they had water. They were throwing water from the front of the stage, and in the middle they had some cannons, and just everything was in the back. If you wanted anything to drink, you have to walk all the way to the back, to the top of the hill, and go back down. But the organization, just, that whole piece was just really bad, and the police weren't. They were just kind of not being cool to the people, and leading up. This kind of leads into what happened after the show. Is we left the Van Halen show, and basically we were in the desert at night in 1983 in San Bernardino. It's pitch black. We didn't know where we were going. We were just walking on the freeway, and we had no idea where we were going. And I remember us finding, like, an overpass to try to go over and see if maybe we can find, like, a little town or something. And we're walking the overpass, and the sheriff sees me and my brother, and he pulls over. He's in a car.
Mhm.
He starts asking us all these questions, and we just have, like, a blanket. I have a blanket, my brother has a blanket, and we're just walking. And And he pulls us over, starts asking us questions like, "Yeah, we're leaving this festival concert," and this guy just starts, reeling into us, calling us potheads and Satanists and all this,
Oh
and
Lord.
we're like, we're lost, we just need help, and then my brother started giving him attitude, and like, Jimmy, mellow out, dude. We're alone, me and you in the desert with one cop. Just be quiet.
Right,
So he
right,
zipped up his lip. So the cop says, "Okay, I'm gonna call a taxi cab for you guys." And he had attitude. He never called a cab.
oh wow.
He never called a cab. He just left us there. So we kept on walking, and we found a CHP station, but it was closed. But we slept on the footsteps of the CHP station until the morning. The sun came up in the morning, and we found a diner a couple blocks away, and then the payphone there, and then we called and he came down and got us. But it was wild, man.
Well, that's
I'll
the
never
funny thing,
forget it.
man. Is people watching this, that are younger would never realize that we would go places without a phone that far in the desert.
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
plan, with
I
no
mean,
plan, and no get out plan.
yeah, well, we're lucky we have that cop didn't kill us or beat us
Right,
up or whatever. But
right on,
it
man.
was wild, and I'll never do that again. And but
Right.
at the same time, hey man, I saw Van Halen, sorta. I saw Scorpions. I saw Ozzy. I Triumph, Judas Priest, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, all for $21.50. That's not going to happen again.
That's a story
Unless
you'll
Monsters of Rock.
you'll carry with you for carry with you for your whole life, man. Well, is there anything else that you want to
Oh
tell me
yeah.
about?
No, actually, let me look at my notes. There's just one other totally dumb fanboy story.
Tell me about it.
I love Eddie Van Halen, but back in the early '90s, going back to that whole carnal knowledge era, I was like super, fanboy for Van Halen, and I remember like my wife, who was then my girlfriend, when we were just starting to date and stuff. um, she would always say, "I'm gonna have Eddie Van Halen's baby." I'm like, "Not before me." I would say stupid stuff like that.
Right.
But you know, Wolfgang Van Halen, he was born in what, the 91. Gosh,
Yeah,
man, I'm sorry, I can't remember what
for
year he was
sure. Yeah,
born.
91.
But back then, at that time, I worked for a mortgage company, no, a mortgage servicing company, and we had Eddie Van Halen's Coldwater Canyon loan. So, I did what I wasn't supposed to do. I looked up Eddie Van Halen's account. Got a copy of his microfiche, and I looked at pictures of the house. I got the address and all that stuff. And back then at the mall, there used to be a store called T-Shirts Plus, where you can go in there and you just get like a plain T-shirt or baseball jersey and take it up, and they put whatever you want on it, like a custom T-shirt. So Wolfgang had just been born. So I went to T-Shirts Plus at the mall, and I found like the smallest baseball jersey, white with the red sleeves, that I could find. Just like, not for a baby, but just the smallest, like toddler size. And I got it, and then I had them put 51 in the front, 50 in the back, and Wolfgang on the back. So I had that made for Wolfgang, and then I got like a little gift bag and that tissue stuff, and then I drove up to the house on Coldwater, and I just go up to the gate. There's like the drive gate, but there's also that side gate there, and there's an intercom, and I press the intercom, and nobody's answering. There's probably a closed circuit camera, and they were probably, whoever was there looking at me and like, "Who's this psycho guy?" or whatever. And I just leave the bag
Was it
there,
gift bag?
as a birthday, yeah, gift bag, as a birthday gift for Wolfgang, because Eddie Van Halen's new kid's born. It's like, I gotta give him something, and I leave it there, and who knows? I don't even know. Hopefully they got it and kept it, or maybe they called security and just told them, burn it or throw it in the trash. It could be a bomb or whatever. Who knows? But that was like, one of my fanboy things. And another thing that I did that I am totally embarrassed and regret doing, it's like, if you go up to the house, there's that road that goes off to the left, and 5150 is up around that that band.
Mhm.
I pulled ivy, dude. I like yanked Eddie Van Halen's ivy and tried to grow it at my house.
Oh
That's like
wow.
the most stupidest thing. Yeah, I know,
I
I know.
probably do that too
I
though,
totally just all my credibility has been shot now,
yeah. That's
but
no
yeah, man,
man.
that's how crazy psycho Eddie Van Halen I was back
You know
then.
what? I think everybody that watches this like that, man. Yeah, I had a chance to meet him very briefly at the Smithsonian, and he was super cool to me, and it was like it was a dream come true to finally meet him. But when the '90s, he came up to me at the Nam show, and a few other people when he got off stage for that Nam jam with Steve Morris, and he starts reaching his hand out, and I'm standing right there, and I'm like 22,
Whoa.
dude. And I just froze. I could not reach my hand out. I just like starstruck, and I regretted that for like forever, because I didn't have a chance to shake his hand. I should have, I just didn't. And then it took till the Smithsonian to get that happen again. But I did get it to happen again, man. But it was a long journey. Man. I've been a like have you ever seen Jack Black's was it not the Pick of Destiny, but the other movie that he did, or maybe it's a comedy album. I can't remember, but he has a thing on there called For the Really Sick Fans. It's a special point DVD. You don't want to watch that. It is hilarious, man. It is funny, but yeah, there's man, people out here are they just love him, man. They just love Eddie.
Yeah.
He just had a thing about
Yeah,
him.
I gotta go down. I got to go get back to Pasadena at some point because they're building like that amphitheater. I think I've seen some pictures because I follow the Pasadena Instagram, and I think they're building like an amphitheater or something,
Yeah,
Edward. And
Mark.
I don't know where
Yep.
it's at as far as completion goes, but I definitely got to go check that out. And I don't know, I know it's been this year we're going on. Is it 2 years already? This October is it going to be two
Yep. two
years or
years.
three
Yep.
years since he passed? And but gosh, dude, I still get emotional. I think the other day I was showing my wife Sandra, um, an Instagram uh video with like George Lopez and Eddie Van Halen, and I just watched it, dude. I started getting emotional again. I'm like, and that thing like with Eddie Van Halen versus Randy Rhoads, I tell a lot of people this because Randy, he was the guy that got me to play guitar seriously, to take it seriously and want to learn how to play. But Randy was here so quick. We got two records with Ozzy and whatever with Quiet Riot, but as far as like being in the eye of the world at that level, he was like a 2 years, a flash in the pan. He came and exploded and all this amazing music and stuff, and then he's gone, and when he died, it killed me because they're like, this is my guy. But then when Eddie Van Halen died, I don't know if you've seen on Instagram. I have a video I put on Instagram where I'm talking about Eddie Van Halen. I'm trying to like keep my composure. Then I forgot what song I played at the end. But with Eddie Van Halen, the difference is, you know, with you and me and everybody, like, Randy was here for 2 years, or two records, 4 years, whatever. But Eddie Van Halen was there our entire life, dude. His life, my whole life playing guitar was almost as long as the music that Eddie Van Halen put out. And for him to be a part of our lives for so long, that's the difference. It's like, dude, this guy has been with me since I started playing. I've learned all this stuff from record one through this. And yeah, I've seen him. I've been inspired. I bought his gear, his amp. I've stolen his Ivy, and
Right
just to, that's the difference. That's why it hurts and it hits so hard. It's because like, dude, he was with us for so long, and now he's gone. And you don't expect that. You expect Eddie Van Halen. He's a guitar hero. He's going to be here. He's going to outlive us. And then you hear that news, you see that Instagram post from Wolf,
on.
and you're like, what happened? This guy that was here for 40 years, that the guy that everybody looks to, that everybody can't wait to see him again, waiting for the next record, waiting for the next tour. It's no longer going to happen. And that that hurt a lot, man, and it still does.
Oh
It's
yeah, man.
crazy.
I know, man. That's kind of what I always kind of close with on here, or close to the close. Is always we go to the day of and what happened that day, and how it affects us. Like you just said, he was with us so long. We learned so much from him, and we're inspired by him so much. And so many people, I mean, millions of people all over the world, man. I've got people on my Instagram that are from Italy, from all over the world, that stay tuned and that want to hear more about him. And that's what I do this for, so that people can learn more. I can learn more about him. I always want to know more about him personally and about his creation. And and his son. I had a chance to meet his son just by an oddball thing where they, at the end of the Tremonti show back in 2012, they were gonna let you meet him if you just bought a piece of merch. I was like, okay, cool. So I got to get a piece of merch, which was great, and I wanted to have that anyway. And then I got to talk to him in Tremonti, and my wife and I just told him, my wife's born on his birthday, actually the same day,
Wow.
and of course she had to share that, but we just told him as we walked away, we are like, dude, we love you and we love your dad so much, man. And we're just able to say that. And I know he gets that probably
Yeah.
every day, but he just meant that much to us,
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
that's why I do this, man. I like
yeah.
I love to meet up with people like you that are just as crazy about Eddie Van Halen as I am, and tell these stories, and give people some more things about Eddie Van Halen that he can't give us anymore, but at least we can kind of dig up things that we don't know and share them.
Yeah. And again, and I appreciate the time, and I
Sure.
hope whatever we did, it's good and you like it and you can use it. But the fact that you're doing something like this is cool, because I always talk about putting some stuff together, doing like a video thing. There's one thing I want to do, which is kind of break down Chrono Knowledge, to the second, and talk about that record. But you know, I just don't get to do it. But the fact that there's guys like you that are doing this, and you just it's not clickety. You're just going out to anybody. Like we never met until today, and we chatted on Instagram, but the fact that you're open to like anybody, and not
Sure.
keeping it within it's just awesome, man, and it
Well,
just keeps Eddie Van Halen going and that memory.
that's the thing, though. The stories that we don't know come from people like you. That's the thing. There's so many people. A lot of my friends that I luckily knew that knew other people knew some stories, and they would pass somebody to me. You know, I just want to know. And some of the greatest stories. Like this guy that I just am editing today, Mike Wolf. He was a fan and he lived in Pasadena. He was friends with Greg Leon, and he ended up being the guy who collected all the bootlegs and put them on digital first.
Oh man.
So this guy who got all the digital first generation from the original sources, he digitized them. He's a studio engineer.
Whoa.
So he got all the original masters from the original tapes, reel to reel, live,
Man.
right? First generation.
Wow.
He took those tapes and he digitized those to super high res as soon as he could, when he had that. And years later, a couple of things happen, and Eddie Van Halen wants him to come to 5150 and share his tapes for him. He ends up at 5150 with the bootlegs
Man.
that we all know about. But Eddie Van Halen wanted those. One reason he wanted them was for different kind of truth. Was the first reason. And the second one was they had another album plan.
Wow.
They had another album plan besides the one we know about, which is Tokyo. And that album never
Mm-hmm.
happened. So that never happened. But yeah, man.
I know he has like he got tons of music up there, and like Wolf said, he doesn't know if he's gonna release anything, and I don't know. Part of me wants to hear stuff like that, but at the same time, he gave us so much, man. Eddie Van Halen is so much music, so much beyond the music. I mean, he turned the whole guitar world upside down. Now in 19, that's another thing about the whole carnal knowledge there. It's like now you can actually use what Eddie Van Halen uses. You can use the exact same guitar he uses. There's the Ernie ball. You can use the amp he uses. And, I went out immediately. I got my September 1991 Ernie Ball Van Halen guitar. I got my PV50 150 right out as soon as they were out. I got it. I'm like, wow, this is what Eddie Van Halen's using. This is the sound. To the fact that, to take it to those level where everybody that can have what he has and use what he uses and get that sound is, that's awesome. That's just he gave, you can say he gave enough, but he gave more than enough to everybody, beyond what a lot of other artists, have done
I
for
mean, even kids,
the industry.
today. You see the young guys today. The 20-year-olds playing guitar. They're doing Eddie Van Halen. Man, that is the coolest thing to
Yeah,
see these kids do that. Right? I mean, they're just so into
yeah,
him.
it's
And
really,
I'll see one young one. Like I got a guy who's friends with Greg Leon. His name's Colin Shrek, I think it is. Anyway, he has one of the white Marshalls. That was one of the Chris Holmes Marshalls, I think. I'm not sure, but it was the white ones that you see in the pictures. And he and Greg are buddies, and he's only 18, man, or something like that. He's very young, and he's so into
yeah,
Marshalls and so into Eddie, and it's like the really coolest thing to see these guys. You know, feel what we felt with Eddie, whatever that was,
yeah.
the magic that he had. It was just crazy, man. Well, thanks for coming on, man, and spending some time with me today. And
You got it, Jeff. I
anytime,
appreciate it.
tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and just Ruben.Reza84. So the number's 84, Ruben.Reza84 on Instagram. And, like I said, I do a lot of little videos throughout. There's like a few minutes. I'll just play a riff. And, there's a part just before Eddie Van Halen passed away. And this is another kind of eerie thing. It's like, maybe within the month or two before Eddie Van Halen passed away, just I was doing so much Van Halen content on my Instagram and not knowing what was going on with Eddie Van Halen. But then, a month or so after I was doing all this, just something told me to do all this Van Halen stuff, and then he passes away, and so it is kind of weird. But yeah, Instagram Ruben.Reza84. And I have a YouTube channel as well. Just look for Ruben Reza is there. I kind of just duplicate the content from Instagram and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some stuff on SoundCloud, my original music. If you're into Eric Johnson, Jeff Beck, and Joe Satriani, go to SoundCloud and check out Ruben Reza. And I have some stuff up there as well.
Okay, cool,
I
man.
appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, man. Anytime you're this side of the country, let me know, and I'll be out there probably when NAMM gets back to winter when that happens.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, buddy. Thank you, man.
All right, take care, man.
You have a great night.
All right, bye-bye.
See you, buddy. Bye-bye.
You too, brother.